Thank you for joining I Am Possible, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Sanjit Singh Dang, who has been a successful venture capitalist, ex Intel Capital, and is currently the chairman Ufirst Capital. And he holds a track record of driving one exit per year. So Sanjit, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. So why don't we start with Intel Capital? A role over there, and you said that you've driven one exit per year. So maybe you can touch upon those exits, maybe talk about the startups over there.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Eddie, for having me on your podcast. It's an honor for me. I appreciate it. At Intel Capital, I looked at several areas from enterprise software to some even on the consumer side and IoT. And then when I left Intel, I really focused quite a bit on technologies, new technology trends, and how do you really get access to those. And, using our network, we are able to drive investments in really cutting edge areas where things are, I would say the world is still trying to understand where things are going, but we are trying to stay ahead of that curve. And, for example, we invested in a company called Palantir, which provides big data analytics to government side in the US. And that's been a very successful investment for us. Similarly, we invested in other companies like Pinterest, Nextdoor that have exited, that have gone public already. And we've invested in a bunch of big data and AI companies like ThoughtSpot, Rubrik, Unifor, which just announced a round last week, a $400 million Series E round last week from NEA. That's one of our portfolio companies as well. And they're driving conversational AI with applications in call center analytics. So, there are these, I would say, mega trends happening for use cases of AI and big data across different verticals that we try to go after. So we are very thematic investors, and then we try to fill in a company in each of those sectors. And so far we have done 15 investments under Ufirst Capital, 4 exits. So it's been a good run so far.
Lovely. How cool is that? Before we get into Ufirst Capital, I want you to open up a little bit more about your past. You understand deep tech and be invested in some of the top startups such as Palantir. So talk to us about deep tech. Talk to us about the role it's gonna play in the near future. If you had to kind of like maybe share your possibly prediction or trends for the future, what technology you think is going to create the most and the deepest impact?
Yeah, great question. We look at technology as electricity. It's going to be everywhere around you. It's going to touch every consumer on earth in one way or another. It's going to touch every business on earth. And that is a shift we are seeing, I think, in the last 2 to 3 years. Earlier, technology sector was always there, very important, very prime, but not still in every sector. But now, from railways to education to maybe metaverse to social networking, everywhere you will see the adoption of technologies. And when I say technologies, I mean AI, big data, graphics, etc. All of these are going to play a pivotal role in redefining these sectors. So when you buy your railway ticket in India, you may actually be chatting with an AI bot in the future that will automatically know, hey, Eddie wants to go from Delhi to Chennai. I already know that based on your calendar. And while it sounds creepy, but it's also intelligent. At the same time, tomorrow, the consumer of tomorrow will not think about train versus plane. The consumer of tomorrow will think about space versus land. Whether I go on vacation to space or to Europe or California. That's the question that's going to come up in the future. And it's not that far out, honestly speaking. We're talking of in the next decade or so. And the foundational enabling elements for each of these use cases is technology. And I think during COVID, COVID has had obviously a huge life impact on the negative side. But on the positive side, it has jacked up the adoption of cloud and digitization, at least by 2x. You can see that in the numbers of a lot of the public companies that are reporting cloud revenues, whether it is AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud, etc. And that curve has only begun. That story has only begun, in fact. And I think for the first time, deep investors like Warren Buffett have realized the importance of technologies, especially deep tech. And that's why you saw him investing 500 million in a company like Snowflake, which gave him rich dividends right after IPO. And I think that's a tectonic shift in Wall Street's thinking and how they view the technology sector. And now they put that at the centerpiece versus another seat on the table. And the deep tech element of that overall tech sector is going to be the core enabling element. And whether it is the use of AI via deep learning or whether it is in hardware, but either of those trends are going to just blast. And there's going to be a huge value creation that's going to happen in that segment of the overall tech sector.
In this decade itself, tech is going to become magical. I mean, it's going to give us profound benefits and create huge transformation. So I'm super excited of the space. Would you like to talk about Ufirst Capital, because it's a venture capital as a service, right? Could you unpack that also?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at Ufirst Capital, we do a couple of things. One is venture capital as a service for corporations, where we work with corporations that want to get into venture capital, but don't have either the know-how or the right team to be able to do it. Venture capital is a great space, but it's not for everyone, unfortunately. And you have to have the network, the understanding, the domain understanding, and the pull in the market to bring in the right startups early on. And most of the corporations lack at that. Typically, a corporation kicks off a CVC, corporate venture capital arm, based on a wine conversation in the boardroom, and they end up putting an internal biz dev executive as head of venture capital. What they see is in 2 to 3 years, they see the returns are not up there and they're not getting into the big deals, even despite opening an office in Silicon Valley. And that's the problem we are trying to solve. And if you even up level the problem, corporations, if you look at, for example, the S&P index, right, most of the corporations are struggling for growth. If you forget the top 10, 20, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, after that, most of the corporations are struggling. So a big question from a growth standpoint for corporations is, should I keep doing internal growth, which I should, but should I also tap into external innovation? And that's where we tend to come in and help out. So venture capital becomes a tool to drive external innovation, to tap into the learnings of the startup ecosystem, to potentially to bring some of them in-house as well, by either investing or by acquiring as well. So that's what we do. And we have 10 corporations that we have signed up so far, including we did a press release with Dow DuPont, and Nisho Electronics, which is a data center company out of Japan, Hitachi High-Tech, and so on. So that's VC as a service part of Ufirst Capital. In addition, we do investments like a fund. We have invested in 15 companies, like I mentioned. And these companies range from SpaceX to ThoughtSpot, Rubrik, etc. Most of these are pretty familiar names in the Valley. And we have seen 4 exits so far, pushing along.
Are you also looking at the Indian market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Indian market is at an inflection point. We are seeing the likes of Ola and Paytm becoming prominent household names across the country. We are also seeing how the government has pushed the digitization play throughout the country. And I think more of these trends will put India up there. And I think India is slowly but surely becoming a data economy, which is very, very impressive, especially with the scale that India has. I think together with the whole democratic setup, I think if there's room for creating much bigger companies than even Ola and Paytm in India using that data set access.
Right. So what do you think India can do to emulate the Silicon Valley model?
It starts from, honestly speaking, it starts from preschool and kindergarten level. And something that we as society do not realize, even in Silicon Valley. But here, kids are brought up in an environment where they are exposed to startups at a very early age. There are kids here who are sitting, high schoolers who are sitting in venture capital arms as EIRs. They're not even interested in college. There are conferences happening like TiCon, and you will see youth participating in a big way at conferences like TiCon. And a key thing that they start to learn at an early age is wear failure as a badge. And that's something that Indian society, and especially parents and teachers, need to understand and recognize. Failure is a stepping stone to success. We all know that, but we don't imbibe it practically, right? And that's where Silicon Valley succeeds tremendously. You will see often resumes where somebody says, I did 4 startups, first 3 failed miserably, but I still did the 4th one. And I'm proud of that. You don't want parents to be able to proudly say, my son or daughter got a job at Cisco or Infosys in Bangalore. I want them to say proudly, my son or daughter said no to a big company job and instead started his or her own company. That's the mindset shift that we need in India. But I think it is happening. It is definitely happening. We are seeing people leave big corporations, which is a common theme in Silicon Valley. We are seeing that theme in India right now, and people starting companies, and I think it's fantastic. And I am also seeing a shift from B2C to B2B companies coming up in India and serving not just in the Indian market, serving the West. And sitting in India, they can have cost structure benefits. And if they have the right mindset, they can serve the West. Over time, they can open a biz dev arm in the US, but to start with, get the engineering going, all of that can be based in India. Freshdesk is a brilliant recent example. So I think we are at India is at a cusp of startup innovation, where 10 years from now, you will see the top 10 companies, not just in the Bombay Stock Exchange, but even in NASDAQ, top 10 Indian companies would probably be startups.
Right, yeah, there's some extremely interesting movement happening here in India, and like you rightfully pointed out, there's this movement from these corporate guys moving out, setting up their own startups, and there are startups who are, having like really brave moonshots. So someone who's been looking at venture capital as a service, I mean, are you also trying to look at maybe supporting, nudging the startups?
So we absolutely look at deep tech startups in the US and in India, and we help them by connecting them to CXOs, whether it's CIOs, CTOs, or CROs, relevant introductions. A key problem that startups always say is, when I go to a big company, it's an ocean for me. I don't know who to talk to, and I end up doing meeting after meeting. X connects to Y, Y connects to Z, and I do 20 meetings and nothing comes out of it. And time is my biggest asset. I've already wasted 20 hours and got nothing out of it. So one of the things we are able to streamline for startups is because we understand what corporations want. They share with us non-public information about their strategies and what they want to invest into. So we are able to very pinpointedly bring the right startups in a targeted manner to the corporation. And that helps the startup tremendously, because the chances of converting the conversation to a PO are much higher versus just having casual conversation and getting to know each other and seeing what happens. You can do 20 of those with a hit rate of maybe 1%.
Right.
So that's how we feel we help startups. And then obviously, then secondly, investing in startups.
Right. Would you like to talk about some of your portfolio companies at Ufirst Capital?
Yeah. I talked about Unifor, which is a call center company. In fact, it came out of India. It came out of IIT Chennai, and then moved to Bay Area. And we have known the founder since his early days of Unifor. And I think it's a brilliant example of a very dogmatic entrepreneur, Umesh Sachdev, who believed in his idea and first meandered to find the right product market fit. But then he found that in the call center space, and then the trajectory just took off. And they raised a Series E, $400 million round. John Chambers has been a long-time investor in the company. I think the company is going places. That's one company that we invested in. In addition, we invested also in a cybersecurity chip company called Kornami recently, and that's rounds in Series C round together with SoftBank Vision Fund. So we are in there together with the SoftBank in the same round, and I think with perfect team, I would say, especially with that domain expertise, the CEO, ex-CEO of Mentor Graphics running Kornami, I think we'll see tremendous progress, hopefully from the company soon, in terms of getting the product out and getting that adopted by data centers, etc. And in addition, we've invested in a bunch of big data and AI, big data analytics and AI companies. ThoughtSpot, which is disrupting the incumbents in that space, like Tableau, Rubrik, which is on the storage side, and so on. So I can talk a lot about more and more about these companies. Obviously, the orthogonal company in the portfolio is SpaceX, and we believe in the vision of Elon Musk, but we see a lot of progress also at an operational level. And I think you will see a whole new world coming out once SpaceX starts to launch their first product, Starlink, which is the internet access via satellite. And that's how they'll blanket the world with internet access. So I can talk more about other portfolio companies, but that gives you a flavor.
Right. What do you mean by orthogonal company? Could you unpack that?
SpaceX is not a standard company in a couple of ways. One is it's exploring an area that is least understood, whether it is just the outer space or all the way to the moon. How do you drive colonization of moon? How do you start to think about building communities in moon? So we are still at step one of SpaceX, having satellites up here. That's point number one. Point number two, SpaceX is also an orthogonal company in terms of how I think they are structured and how they will pan out over time. I actually, in my humble view, it's a conglomerate. It's not one company. So there are already rumors of Starlink getting spun off once the pilot is public, and once there is significant revenue in Starlink. So we'll see what happens. But that will be the first spin-off out of SpaceX, but then you will probably see more such spin-offs happening out of SpaceX as well. So it is an orthogonal company in that respect as well. And Elon Musk doesn't do simple things. He's trying to change mankind. It's not just let's create yet another social media app, right? So that's why it's a very orthogonal company and huge learning for all of us.
Right. Have you seen any other orthogonal companies? I mean, that or you have invested in, or is there anything you think in that moonshot space happening here in India?
There are a lot of companies we see in air pollution space, water conservation space, water purification space, and I think there are orthogonal ideas coming to solve grassroots problems in India. You can always create the next B2B company out of India, and I think that is happening, and that's excellent. But there are still grassroots level problems that the startup ecosystem can solve instead of just waiting for the government to solve. So we are seeing companies that are finding new technologies for getting air purified, for example. And can you carry the right kind of air purifier? There are a lot of air purifiers in the market, but can you carry a simple portable device that will just make sure you get clean air access all the time, and it's embedded into your phone, and so on. So there are a lot of such companies that are coming up that are, I think, going to solve these grassroots level problems, or even in the agriculture space in India. How do you bring AI in agriculture? And how do you predict which part of your crops will actually succeed? Which will be the most profitable? Which will be the most fruitful? So there are a lot of things happening in India, I think, in each of these sectors that we're seeing. I think it's an exciting time for the Indian startup ecosystem.
What are your views on Metaverse, this hype that the world is seeing?
I have actually kept in touch with the overall, I would say, the virtual reality ecosystem, which is a part of Metaverse. But if you look at the Metaverse and if you start segmenting it by device, from mobile to laptops to screenless to virtual reality, or maybe even augmented reality in between, I think driving applications on traditional devices, mobile and laptops and desktops, you will see that happening, but the experience won't be immersive. For a true metaverse experience, like you and I doing this Zoom call in VR while actually feeling we are sitting in the same room, that is true metaverse style experience. So it doesn't just extend into gaming as an application. Gaming is the first application for metaverse, but beyond that, person to person communication or education or commerce. Tomorrow, you may not go to a Walmart store in person. You might actually go to a Walmart store in virtual reality and start picking Coke or bread, etc., in virtual reality. But for that to happen, if you look at the technology stack that has to enable application like e-commerce in virtual reality, you start with the headset, virtual reality headset, and then you start building OS, the whole layer, middleware, and then applications. The headset is not there yet. I feel there are still engineering challenges in headset because of motion sickness, weight distribution. Human beings are not used to putting a heavy headset on the forehead. We were not born to do that. So how do you do weight distribution on the head? Right? And how do you control motion sickness? How do you make sure the resolution is up there? So I think there are still engineering cycles of learning that some of the headsets have to go through. But the fact that Mark Zuckerberg decided to push it forward, he definitely believes in metaverse as a concept, and obviously his Oculus team. He acquired a company named Oculus, for viewers who may not be familiar with. It's a VR headset company that he acquired a few years ago for roughly $2 billion. So I think once the headset is up there, then you will start to see the whole stack really gear up. And I can tell you that the level of immersive experience that you can get in metaverse, in VR-based metaverse, will be unparalleled. And I think the world will rush to that. I published an article, I think in Venture Beat a few years ago, predicting how the VR apps will grow. I think you will see that rate of growth pan out now because of the push that Facebook is driving in metaverse. And you
Right,
will
right.
see everything, the whole world, the whole web, all of the applications that we do today on traditional devices start moving towards metaverse. Whether it is concerts or whether it is Morgan Stanley's website, etc., everything will be. You
Right.
might be eating digital food only.
Right. Right. So the podcast is called I Am Possible because I believe that we're getting into limitless in a world. So, what do you think what we said was impossible is going to be possible in this decade?
Yeah, I think one, like I mentioned, going to space is going to be the norm. So your annual vacation planning will have space as one of the top 3 line items. And it may not be going all the way to the moon anytime soon, but at least space. Second is, this is bold, but I think over time, the governments will cease to exist. We are entering a decentralized world driven by the cryptocurrency space, but I think that's going to happen in other sectors also. And having one government controlling a country has been the model of operation for all nations till now. But I think slowly you will start to see a transition out of that. And some looking countries will adopt it first. Others may not. Others may detest it. But I think everybody, it's like gravity. Decentralization will happen. And it will start with governments. And then it will go to corporations also. Why do you need a CEO in a corporation to make all the decisions? Or the executive team in general? You may not. You can do that on a blockchain. if you have a trust-built network and enough intelligence built in. So you will start to see new structures, organizational structures at company level, at national level coming up as well. And it may not be an abrupt change, but I think the thinking will change. Number 3, you will see technology all around you, AI all around. You won't even ask, is this app or is this company using AI? I think that's going to be everywhere. It's going to be built in. And number 4, we talked about it, but I think Metaverse will catapult the world to a whole new level once it happens. But it's, I think, at least 5 years away.
Lovely. Sanjit, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Wish you and your team the very best. And I think what I take away from the conversation is the decentralized world and the decentralized government. I think, yes, we need to, there is so many restrictions in a physical world. I mean, these borders and everything, they restrict you. I think the web 3.0 metaverse, if it is truly as we say it's going to be like a decentralized, interoperable, open world, I think the world will be so much better, and so far I think all the innovations are built in silos, and if we kind of approach that open collaborative innovation, we'll be able to accelerate innovation and create innovation which touches everyone rather than just being going into the hands of the select few, what's been happening, so far. Because if you see, even not just a world which is extremely unequitable, because it's 99% owns just 1% owns 99% of the global wealth, and even the blockchain space, cryptocurrency, I think it's 2% owns the entire, the whales owns the entire coin. So I hope that we get into a world where it's more equitable. And so thank you, and really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Wish you the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Eddie, for having me. I really enjoyed the discussion.